right now, there's so much changing in the world outside. Uh, we have endured a pandemic, global instability, which continues based on the events last week as well, the unfortunate events, and an ongoing technological revolution transforming the world of work around us. The B2B buyer's journey has shifted the landscape of emerging technology, and we have keeping the global economic climate on the mind. For B2B marketing leaders, there's a lot on their plates, but we are going to help you make sense all of it. In June, we partnered with Ipsos to release our inaugural B2B marketing benchmark report, which gathered insights from around 2,000 B2B leaders to better understand the B2B marketing disciplines, pain points, and potential opportunities. The insights we covered about where B2B is headed will set the stage for how we discuss the state of B2B sector at today's event and how we are thinking about B2B marketing here at LinkedIn. We surveyed 8 global markets to get a pulse on what's going on in B2B, and one of them was India. India is a particularly fascinating market, and I don't think so I need to explain to this crowd why. We are at a cusp of something really, really important which is going to happen in India. It's globally being recognized as an economy which is going to play a very big role in the future. I'm joined here today by Amit, Adarkar, CEO of Ipsos, who partnered with LinkedIn to produce this first of its kind in-depth study. Amit, welcome.
Thank you.
And I would love if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and the methodology behind the B2B marketing benchmark report.
Sure. Thanks, Ashutosh, and pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So I think Ipsos is a market research organization. We are in the top 3 organizations in this domain worldwide, and we have, we sort of have a business relationship with LinkedIn because, just like all of the people in this room, we are too a B2B company. Our clients are all, companies across sectors. I look after the India office, and I'm happy to share some of the findings in this forum. Now, Ashutosh talked about the research that we completed a couple of months ago. Let me give you a bit of a context about how that research was designed. So as Ashutosh said, we went to 8 countries. So in the Americas, we covered the US and Brazil. In Europe, we went to the UK, Germany, and France. And closer home in Asia Pacific, apart from India, we covered Singapore and Australia. Now, when we designed this research, the idea was to be consistent and comprehensive. So we had the same consistent design across the 8 countries. But today, obviously, we'll delve a bit deeper into the India data. And as we go along, we'll contrast how the India data looks as compared to rest of the markets, right? One of the mentions earlier was how B2B marketing, the task of B2B marketing, is very different than B2C. And I think the basic underlying difference is that unlike B2C where you talk to consumers, in B2B you're talking to multiple stakeholders. And at times, some of these stakeholders also have different agendas and different opinions. So to get a very comprehensive perspective, we spoke to multiple stakeholders across the organizations that we spoke to. So we spoke to the C-suite, we spoke to the CMOs, we spoke to the CFOs. We also spoke to senior marketing professionals. We spoke to organizations which are small, less than 10 employees. We spoke to companies which are mid-sized, between 10 and 500 employees. And we also covered organizations which are big, with 500 plus employees. So the idea was to get a bit of a 40,000 feet view of what's happening across different sizes of organizations. We covered healthcare, financial services, agencies, professional services. So the design itself was quite comprehensive. And as I mentioned, it was consistent across the 8 markets. But obviously today we'll focus a bit more on some of the exciting findings of the India leg.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Amit. So let's start with the good news. There's only good news in this report, by the way, but let's start with the biggest good news, right? So 81% very optimistic about the budget. And I'm not surprised in India, like as I was saying earlier, India market is poised for real amazing growth in the years to come. Economy is doing well. We are demographic dividend. The middle class is ballooning. People are opening up their pockets. The disposable income is increasing, right? So it's encouraging. But I want to bring another aspect of it, right?
Sure.
The optimism is good on the slide, but when you go out there, right, I see a lot of CMOs still, sitting on that budget, still saying not very sure of whether they want to spend that money. So any thoughts there?
No, I think it's a good point. And when the data that we are talking, and also some of the understanding that we have, this is true that India, given how things are shaping up at a country level, the fact that we seem to be relatively unscathed as compared to what's happening in other countries, the overall data is positive, and we see this across sectors, across industries. To me, this number is a bit of a lead indicator. It doesn't explain what has happened in the past or what's happening today as we speak. For me, it's a lead indicator of what's likely to happen in the next 3 months, 6 months, and a year. And whenever we look at indices like that, we also try to triangulate. So if we look at the overall consumer sentiment, business sentiment, it sort of backs up some of these findings. Now, obviously, when we go through some of the other data points, you'll also realize that it's not just one number, but we can actually triangulate that in terms of what are people saying, what are the CMOs saying, what are the CFOs saying when it comes to specific things that they are doing, specific things they want to start doing in future. So it's for me, it's all about the triangulation. But I think it's always nice to set the context and say, yes, things are positive. And that sort of comes across strongly when we start looking at the India data and start comparing it with, rest of the 7 countries that we surveyed.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think, as you rightly said, it's a leading indicator, and I think the sentiment is very much there. Intent might be a little later based on the situation, right? Also, I think there's so much changing in the world with the technological advancements, right? So I believe, there's a realization of some of these technological changes on MarTech and other things will change a lot of stuff, but leveraging some of that is still taking time, right? So, I think there's a bunch of data points on the report, like I'll not go through each one of them, but the generative AI, the value of generative AI, the productivity by using that technology, that's all very much realized, but, they understand, but the true, implementation of it is, or execution of it is taking time.
Yeah, that's true. And I think if you look at some of the data points on the screen, there is an appetite to start using tech more than earlier, which is a good indicator. And there's obviously a lot of mention of, using generative AI currently, and an appetite to use it even more as we go ahead in future. So these are all good indicators, and they tie in quite well with the overall, bullishness about budgets and optimism. But I think the critical point, Ashutosh, here to understand is that you also see a bit of a balanced perspective. If you look at some of the data points, there's a mention of, you see 65% saying that they are currently using it to generate content, which is more the softer creative side. But at the same time, there's a lot of mention of using it to drive efficiency. And for me, that's a good idea, because that tells me that currently the set of marketeers, not only they are exhibiting a sense of optimism, but they also want to have a pragmatic and balanced perspective of, in certain cases, try to get some hard efficiencies out of using tech and using AI as well as Gen AI. But at the same time, use the tool also to get a bit more creative. And I think for me, when I was looking at some of the earlier presentations, that came out as a strong task, that usually B2B has always been a bit overshadowed by B2C, where the focus has been on, let's say, building brands, or be at the ahead of driving the funnel. But I think for me, this is encouraging that we are looking at both efficiency as well as driving a bit of a content and creativity. That's a good indicator for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the technologies which we are experiencing right now are going to absolutely have a huge impact on the productivity and the efficiency side. We'll come back to it, I think, later as well. We're going to talk about the skills required, but let's hold that. I think one other thing which I saw in the report, which was very encouraging, is that the importance of the CMO. CMO is finding that seat on the table, right? And the tailwinds are really coming from the board saying we are behind you, right? Go and perform, execute, because they see that CMOs are bringing the revenue, right? So are you seeing that as well in your the conversations which you are having with your clients?
Yeah. So I think in our data itself, this is quite sort of pronounced in the India data when I look at some of the other data, and also the conversations that we have with our clients across sectors. This is the sense that we get that maybe. Given the optimism, given the appetite to use technology more, given the existing usage of technology, there is this sense that now as a CMO, as a senior marketing professional, I have the support of my C-suite, and we saw this quite predominantly because maybe historically the CMO or the senior management, senior marketing folks will always have to struggle to get budgets, and in a classical sense, the budgets are more around creating few ads in a year, and that's pretty much the role of marketing. But now I think with tech, there's this sense that we can do a lot much more, and we'll talk about the changing role of branding in a little while. But for me, this data point is quite interesting. That what we're hearing from the senior marketing folks and CMOs is that now there's a lot of tailwind coming in from C-suite to say that yes, here's the money on the budget, but at the same time, it comes with a bit of a caveat. There's expectation of delivery. There's expectation of setting very transparent KPIs and metrics to deliver. But I think they go hand in hand. I mean, there's no free lunch in this world. So obviously, if somebody's saying, here's the budget, somebody's going to ask questions about how are you going to spend the budget. So obviously, there's discussions about ROI and are we spending the money the right way. But at least the set is being, led in terms of, yes, we are optimistic, we want to spend a bit more, but at the same time, yes, we want more accountability. So these things are going hand in hand. And for me, this is quite encouraging that there's not just a positive environment, but there's money on the table. But at the same time, a lot of hard questions are being asked and will get asked about show me the ROI or show me the return about what is working, what is not.
And that's fair, right? Like if you want that seat at the table, you'll have to answer that question. I was trying to do a CMO, and he was saying that I'm trying to be best friends with the CFO, and he said that my data sets, I'm trying to build reports, and I'm sharing those reports real time with the CFO, so that when we go to that board meeting, some of that questions which he's going to ask are answered already, right? Like he sees the data transparently, and and I found that very smart, saying you share the reports with the CFOs real time, so they're seeing the progress, they're seeing some of the numbers on ROI.
And this is actually a fascinating point, Ashutosh, because typically CMOs and CFOs don't always tend to be the best of buddies. With digitization, I think the big change is that CFOs can see numbers. And usually, the feedback that we used to capture way back when life was around, simple television ads, it's difficult to get hard numbers. But here you run a campaign on digital, you have numbers. Now, obviously, the validity of the numbers and all of that, that's a different issue. But I think any classical CFO will love the numbers. So I think somehow there's a sense that, the C-suite push is coming not only from the C-level, but also from the CFO. And because you're seeing numbers and there's a sense of joint accountability, and which is the interesting trend, I guess.
Yeah, but again, I'll play the devil here again and say, okay, let's look at the counterpart of it. Like this statistic about 79% saying that the importance of brand building is being realized by the board and even the C-suite. I still see a lot of CMOs starting with bottom funnel and like saying, I'm just interested in bottom funnel because that's easy to prove. I can show a quantitative ROI to the board, but we do realize over the period of time that that thing will not work. You need a brand. You need to spend on the brand as well because the awareness is a very important part of it. Like, so are you seeing that, and what's your comment on that?
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's a good point because I would look at actually this in terms of, let's say, 3 broad stages. The earliest possible stage was there's a lot of copy paste from B2C to B2B where sort of have the same funnel approach. Just take that blueprint and apply it in B2B, which clearly it's not the right thing to do. And maybe a few years ago when the pace of digitalization started, there was a lot of focus on what used to be called as performance marketing. And there was this debate about brand versus performance. And performance marketing, there's a mandate to just spend a part of the budget on digital so that, there's a tick on the CMO or the marketing professionals, goal sheet that I'm quote unquote doing digital, right? That was the thing. I think now we are shifting to something which is a bit different, where the discussions that I hear are not really brand versus performance, but they're getting intrinsically linked somewhere. And to your point that, instead of focusing only on certain part of the funnel, it's throughout the funnel.
Right.
And how do you get a bit of an integrated sense of what's happening? In fact, one of the data sets which is not there on this chart, and I'm sure people will be able to download the report and have a look at it, that there's an increasing or equal importance on not just the traditional brand building, but also things like demand generation and lead generation. And that's where the sense of accountability is coming in. That, as a CMO, the expectation is not be accountable for only one part of the funnel, but take charge of the entire funnel, which means that, it's easier to justify how am I trying to balance out both the parts. And they're actually not parts which are fighting against each other. That, am I doing brand marketing? Am I doing performance marketing? Actually, I'm doing both, and I'm trying to get the linkages.
Yeah.
So that's something which is, I would say, phase 3 of what we are seeing. And that's a positive development, in my opinion.
The ownership of the complete funnel is really, really interesting because, as you said, there's no internal conflict, right? Okay. So, and this is a point where I probably let's spend few minutes. I think there's so much change on technology side. Your younger generation is coming in, and in the family-owned businesses, challenging some of the old kind of tenants and saying, okay, there are better ways, there are new ways to do those things. But one of the things is having the right skills in the team is going to play a very big role, right? You have to have the right skills, right? The technology exists, but you need to have the people who can deliver and execute that technology, right? So what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I think it's also a very good point, Ashutosh. And, when we started discussing, we talked about 81% of people feel optimistic about budgets. And, you had this very valid comment that, but we don't see that translated in reality right now. I think the skill part is a very critical part of that missing link because the intent is there. There are budgets, there is support. But I think what is holding back is actually the skill element. And I talked about how there's an expectation that the CMOs actually own the entire funnel and try to sort of balance between the brand as well as performance and get these linkages. Now, there are two kinds of skills which are critical, which come out very strongly, not only in the research, but whatever learning that we have. One is obviously the harder tech skills. So in our data, there's a lot of appetite in sort of saying that MarTech is going to be quite important. AdTech is going to be quite critical. Those are more the tech skills that people expect. At the same time, the other missing half is the softer skills because a lot of CMOs and especially their team members, they feel that maybe I'm not ready. I need a bit of a hand holding. I need to fully understand how to leverage the tech and things like content creation, things like, for example, changing the mindset. So I see that as a bit of a resistance, or maybe resistance is not the right term. That's a bit of a bottleneck right now. But the good part is that the intent is there, and the ecosystem is in place. But I think balancing these two skills, and a lot of in our data, I think a lot of CMOs say that they have started skilling and reskilling themselves, and they see a need to skill and reskill their team members even more going ahead. But again, the caveat is that it's both kinds of skills. It's the tech, the traditional tech, MarTech kind of skills. At the same time, skills which enable them to change their own mindset, change the mindset of their team members. Problem solving is coming up. Problem identification is a big skill which is coming up. So all of that.
Yeah. By the way, a disclaimer, I didn't coach Amit to say any of it because we at LinkedIn believe this truly, right? With the advent of technology, the hard skills obviously are important, but the soft skills, there'll be a true premium in the years to come. With the AI specifically, the true value of human skills will be really at premium. Creative thinking, problem solving, identification of problem. These are the skills which will be really, really important in the days to come, right? So just to bring this home, and I think Amit and I can go for probably a couple of more hours because there's so much interesting data in this report. But I'm going to just bring it home. Like you and I talked about the optimism around the budgets. We talked about the advent of technology, like how some of those technologies going to make some of the things really, really easy, productive, and effective for all of us. The CMO is sitting on the table with the board and the value they're going to drive, right? The value of the brand, the ownership of the full funnel, and then obviously the importance of the skills. So just to wrap it up, like Amit, any important trend which you just want to highlight, any important last takeaway for the crowd?
Yeah, so actually, maybe I can talk about one trend and one caveat, just to bit of a balance it out. So I think the trend is obviously that how can marketeers actually use this positivity and start doing things even more. I think a lot that depends upon the changes in mindset and the changes in openness, because we looked at the data for India and contrasted with some of the other countries. And we don't, unfortunately, see the same level of positivity elsewhere. Like, for example, we talked about three European countries, and in those countries, there are a lot of concerns about AI in general, because of maybe stronger regulation, because of stronger government action. Now, obviously, from an India perspective, the PDP development is still very new. We want to figure out how that pans out. But the conversion is going to be critical, and to that extent, whoever has a bit of a first move advantage will be able to reap the benefits. Otherwise, so I think speed is going to be of essence of converting that positive sentiments into something which is more active. And the sort of a caveat is, because there's a lot of scrutiny from the C-level, uh, uh, the tendency will be to get things right first. Because if there are any mishaps in terms of how things are being done, or the data or the metrics don't support, this can actually backfire, saying that, oh, but there was the money, but then nothing is happening. So I think to that extent, there's going to be a fair amount of accountability expectations, which is in a way positive, but it's also a caveat that if you don't, then
Deliver.
things become a bit tough
Yeah.
from the future perspective. So I think what I would just say that it's what we are seeing is a bit of a necessary condition. It may not be sufficient, and that's where the agility and a strong delivery mechanism, that's going to actually make it with the gap between the lip and the cup. I think that's going to be
Yeah.
the big difference.
Fantastic, Amit. I think just to summarize, I think the speed of execution, the agility, having the right skills on the team, and delivering the value and the accountability which comes with the job will continue to be the focus. But again, as I said, there's so much more we could have talked about in the report. You can download the report. But Amit, thank you for being here. It was lovely to talk to you, and thank you. Thank
Pleasure.
you, everybody.